This is Hannibal here from the HannibalTV.com. Just finished watching the Dynamite Kid Dark Side of the Ring documentary, and I have to say, out of season three, I have not really liked it, but this was by far the best episode of season three. Not even close. The other ones, I mean, the collision in Korea, I had to watch in three parts because it was so boring. But this one zoomed by, and again, I have talked to his daughter Bronwyn, and I have an interview with her up here, and she's going to do another interview with me in a few weeks about how she feels about this documentary. She's still digesting it. Maybe it didn't show the fatherly side of him, and it showed really the dark side, which seems to be their focus, just bashing people and not really saying anything good about them for most of these, other than Chris Benoit. When they did season 2, they made him seem almost like a heroic figure. And Dynamite Kid's ex-wife had a good point in this. Why is Chris Benoit put on a pedestal more than Dynamite Kid? When she didn't mention Chris Benoit's name, but she said other wrestlers that have done much more horrible than what Dynamite did. And she has to be talking about Chris Benoit because what he did was absolutely horrible. And you can blame it on concussion issues all you want. There's a lot of people out there that have concussion issues, including Dynamite Kid, who didn't kill their wife and child. Now, mind you, it's not the Dynamite Kid. According to this interview, he actually threatened to kill his wife when she was pregnant. So there's a similarity, and there's no question, as she brought up, Dynamite did have concussion issues, flying headbutts, all the fights he was in his life, which there's a lot of them, a lot. He was a hard person. He seemed to like to fight. I think Danny Spivey, who I've also interviewed. And by the way, I did put the link to a compilation video I did about Dynamite Kid. It's almost 2 hours long. It's in the description of this, and it's very detailed. The most detailed account Jacques Rougeau ever gave of his situation. But I digress there a second. Danny Spivey, a.k.a. Waylon Mercy, who was friends with Dynamite and actually once got into a fight with him, according to Dynamite's book. And I think Danny confirmed that with me too. But he said Dynamite was doing like underground fighting for money before he moved back to England. So he really enjoyed fighting. As far as his dark side, there's other stories I know from training in the dungeon with Bruce Hart, who would tell us stories during the training down there at the dungeon all the time, and a lot of them had to do with Dynamite. And I'm not going to talk about them because there's even some worse stuff than what's in this Dark Side of the Ring documentary. But I'm not going to spread hearsay. But Bruce Hart was his brother-in-law, and he certainly had some stories. By the way, Davey X tipped me $4.99. Really appreciate all the tips. And by the way, I'm wearing my Hannibal 420 sweater. If anyone wants to help support the channel, you can buy these in the merchandise site that's in the description of this or at the HannibalTV.com. So I'll have to have a puff of that since I'm wearing my Hannibal 420 sweater. Jacques Rougeau gave his account in there. For the people that like to say, why did he use a roll of quarters? Jacques, although he would stand up for himself, he's very proud. And I know there's a certain French geek reporter out there that may or may not work for the WWE that Jacques doesn't really like now. And I'd like to actually see him do it to this guy, because I can actually agree with Jacques that this guy definitely deserve. There's so many people these days that run their mouths with no repercussions, and I'd like to see some of these people get their just due. So I don't know if Jacques will do it to this guy that I won't name, but this guy would deserve it. But as far as why Jacques used the roll of quarters, by the way, it was not a brass knuckles, as someone in the interview alluded to. It was a roll of quarters. It was to ensure that he'd win, because Jacques would fight if he had to, but he was not a fighter. He was not all juiced up like Dynamite. If you ever look at Jacques' physique, he had a regular person's physique that worked out, but not the type of shoulders, for instance, and water retention that someone on a lot of steroids would have. And he discussed in this, seeing one incident in the WWE locker room where Dynamite was walking around allegedly with a steroid sticking right out of his ass, a steroid needle. And that's not the first time I've heard of Dynamite being that blatant about steroid use. I also heard, and I believe this was from the Honky Tonk Man, so take it with a grain of salt, but like he would just take the steroid needles and throw them in like the corner of the dressing room or against the wall, which is not the most sanitary thing. He wouldn't actually dispose of them. But yeah, so that's very intimidating. He already got beat up once by Dynamite. People were making fun of him. He's not a fighter. This guy's juiced up. Bad News Allen, a medalist in Olympics in judo, is friends with him. Dino Bravo was more on Dynamite's side with all Dino's Mafia connections. And there was Bret Hart, an accomplished amateur wrestler to some extent. Jim Neidhart, former NFL football player. I don't blame Jacques for using the roll of quarters. Jacques' very lucky that his plan went exactly the best it could have gone. So, anyways, yeah, I would say the best Dark Side of the Ring of the season so far. I did not really like the Jake the Snake one, to be perfectly honest, the one on Grizzly Smith, just because, again, it's all a lot of hearsay, and there are some conflicting stories in there that I don't even want to get into because it's just so dark. All I can tell you is in the Ultimate Warrior one, Jake lied a lot, blatantly lied a lot. And some of those facts have been proven that he was 100% lying in the Ultimate Warrior one. So for the people that want to take the Grizzly Smith one, like Jake is suddenly going to be telling the 100% truth, I don't know. But I am going to have Baby Doll, who used to be the daughter-in-law of Grizzly Smith, on my show on Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. Someone says the Grizzly Smith was just depressing. So yeah, that's all I'm going to say about the Dynamite. I do actually like Bronwyn, even though I didn't know her when I was in Calgary for some reason. We may have seen each other, but we weren't friends or anything. But I did find when I did the interview with her that I would consider her a friend, as I would consider actually every single family member of the Hearts, even Ted. Even though we're, as all friends, we have our ups and downs, I would still consider him a friend. And so I'm not going to say anything further about it. I'm sorry that she probably had a sad experience watching this, knowing that it was her father, and it was not very much positive. As I said, I wish they'd given more positive. So I'll get into some of your questions. And again, I'll suggest people watch my compilation video, nearly 2 hours, on the Dynamite Kid. And since I did that one, there's been other people that have talked about him to me. Somebody just tipped me $5. Thank you very much. Hey, are they going to do your Dark Side of the Ring? Oh, I wouldn't. I don't think I would necessarily like that. Judging about how they try to destroy the people that they don't necessarily like. Unless you're like an AEW on their side of things, it seems like you kind of get destroyed. Bill Romansky says he'll be at the Wichita, Kansas World Class Revolution event on October 3rd. I'll be there covering that. World Class Revolution, everybody subscribe to their YouTube channel. I have an agreement with them for a year. I'm going to be working with them. They've been on hiatus since COVID. They like that Texas style of wrestling, which the other companies said they were going to do. Then they're now more of a kids-oriented federation with kids camps and kids wrestling. This is going to be real Texas wrestling, and they have huge star power. I mean, they've used the Ross and Marshall Von Erich in the past, and in fact, Ross and Marshall Von Erich are going to be my first guests on the World Class Revolution podcast coming up, and I think very highly of them as wrestlers. Mike wants Earthquake's daughter for an interview. Tito Santana's daughter, who's actually very good looking and is also a martial artist, wants to do an interview with me. Someone says his wife liked the Dynamite Kid episode. Tom Powers says the #1 wrestling channel. And I did mention this week probably a couple of times that I am the #1 shoot interviewer for wrestling on YouTube, and that's because I get the most views. Some people said, well, you're interviewing guys like the Goon. There's other people that have John Cena and The Rock, so you can't be the top interviewer. Well, I get more views than them. On a monthly basis, I get the most views of any wrestling shoot interviewer. So that's the facts. And yeah, I'll brag about it because I love to brag. Rock Kit Payload says Chris Benoit was a murdering bastard. Hope he's rotting in hell. It disgusts me that so many people give him a pass. Give him a pass. Buddy Small sending prayers my way. I'm doing great. Let's give the prayers to the people that can't eat and the animals out there that are stray and the people that have lost their businesses in places like Ontario here where we're still on lockdown. People asking why I'm using my THC pen so much lately. It's because I'm on lockdown and it's going on till the end of July here, even though everywhere else is opening up. Tom, yes, without saying that out loud, she tells that story and she told it on CNN too. Early morning reviews. Yeah, I went for a run. I seem to like running as sun rises lately, especially since we're on lockdown here. There's nobody on the street, especially on a Sunday morning at like between 4 and 6:30 in the morning when I was out there running. The sun was coming up. Whereas normally you'll actually see traffic around those hours, but everything's locked down here. Rex remembers Spivey saying Dynamite was doing bare knuckle fighting. If you're talking about Dynamite Kid being dead, sadly he did die. X Davy X, good question about Cody Hall. He kind of dropped off the face of the earth. I think that's Scott Hall's son, Billy Jack. The last I heard from him was on my birthday. I did not get to the phone, but he left a message saying he was calling from someone else's phone because he didn't have a phone and he wanted to wish me happy birthday. So I believe he was the only person from the wrestling business that wished me happy birthday. So even though I am closer to Billy Graham, I don't blame Billy Graham. He's quite old. I think, had his 78th birthday. And Billy Jack, speaking of people with CTE issues, he has serious CTE issues. That's why he was on those concussion lawsuits that ended up getting thrown out. But has Billy Jack Haynes gone on a murdering spree? I just don't find that as an excuse for murder. Sorry, I don't. Particularly someone that's been working a full WWE schedule, which is hard to do with a brain that's not working well. Damien, as much as I like Jacques, he might actually see this. I would say he can't actually say it was a shoot and be incriminating himself. But I can say that the Montreal wrestling organizations were at one point did have some connections, according to reports, particularly the one that Gino Brito was involved with. And I'm friends with Gino Brito, but you can look up his history to see some of his connections. And I mean, Dino Bravo, you know what he was connected with, why he was killed. And he was partners with Gino Brito, and Jacques and I never talked about that, but we all know that world is around in Montreal. Because it runs off into this area too, and working some of the clubs that I've worked at, it's around in these areas. So was it a rib? I would be more on the side of it was legitimate. Definitely. And I don't think that that Dynamite kid is some kind of pansy that if he didn't think there was some legitimacy to it, he would actually not attack Jacques over it. And that would be the best explanation of why he never got revenge on Jacques, because obviously he didn't care that much about the WWE job, unless there was some sort of under the table payday by McMahon to make him not get revenge. I really don't know. What strain? I don't even know what I was smoking there. Honestly, people give me this stuff. Bronc, Sunday morning wake and bake. Well, as I've said, because it's lockdown here, I don't even have to get up for anything. So I'm now in the process of just staying awake until I get tired and then sleeping. It doesn't matter if I go to bed at noon, 7 a.m., 4 p.m., 9 p.m. Everything that I like to do isn't open right now. Steve Gallagher watching from Southampton, England. I actually wrestled there for the UK, for All-Star Wrestling in the UK before. I think a Butlins holiday camp. Someone says Jacques is country strong, whatever that means. Mike, the Mountie and Earthquake should 100% be in the WWE Hall of Fame. The Mountie was like one of the characters everyone associates with WWE. Andrew B., good morning from St. Louis, Missouri. Ivan says both British Bulldogs deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. I agree. And again, as Dynamite's ex-wife pointed out, the stuff that Dynamite did isn't on the same level as a Benoit, at least what he was actually found guilty of, which I don't even know if he had a criminal record, because Alberta is kind of like Texas. The Alberta style of wrestling is also very similar to the Texas style of wrestling, by the way, which is kind of why I like Texas. They like overall, of course, there's some that don't do it, but overall, it's more realistic, hard-hitting style. But yeah, I'm just saying that because, like in Alberta, particularly in the 80s, you get into fights, they're not going to give you a criminal record over it. Henry says Jacques was justified in his opinion. Bill says don't be like Grizzly. Tom Powers says the two things that were true in WWE is Andre was a giant and Jake was a snake. Jake is a great worker, one of the best workers. He'll tell. I'm not denying it. I'm not being sarcastic either. He is one of the best workers. He can make you believe anything. Will I ever interview Nails? I hope so. Dynamite was one of the best as far as technical wrestling ability and realistic wrestling. You could say that for sure. Was he the best on the mic? No. Was he unfortunately, and I will say this, I wish he had been a heel in WWE. He was a good guy. When his true personality is a heel, he could have really been that. This is one of the reasons, although I think he's a great wrestler, I was never and I admire his wrestling ability now that I have been a wrestler and I can see how impressive it was what he did. But he wasn't that great of a good guy to me. And now that I know, like he was a natural heel and had a big mean streak in him. So imagine how great he could have been as a heel in WWE. But he's not the type that Hulk Hogan would have wanted to work, even though he could have made Hulk Hogan look great. Because, yeah. But, yeah, it's too bad he couldn't have been a heel. Bill, I'm not wrestling in Wichita. I'm covering it. I don't even know the card for Wichita. Really, I guess we're going to find out. Subscribe to the World Class Revolution YouTube channel. Will I interview Damian Demento? I would like to. He's entertaining. Last time I asked him, he wasn't interested in having anything to do with wrestling. But maybe I'll check in another time. Why will Bob Holly not do my show? At one point, I think he had a website, and I messaged him about it and never heard back. And I don't even know if that website exists anymore. Another point, he was going to be at an event in Iowa, a Hall of Fame event. I have his match from that day. I forget who it was against. And I talked to the promoters, could you get me an interview with Bob Holly? And he said, before even asking Bob Holly, I can tell you right now, that's the one guy I can't get you an interview with. So why? He probably just doesn't like doing interviews. And would I interview him? Yeah, sure. If someone that knows him wants to convince him to do an interview with me, why not? Andrew, I never had any first-hand experience with Dynamite outside the ring. One thing that is funny, I'll tell you guys a funny story about Bruce Hart that told, because they talk in this documentary that he would H-bomb people. He was known for and this has come out lots, so I'm not telling any scoop here. Bill Anderson even told a version of this to me where he did it to a ring boy, which he could have actually died, sadly, from that. and they were worried he would die, but it's a long story. You got to listen to Bill Anderson talking about it. But I'll tell you the one Bruce Hart told me. They were driving on the Stampede territory, and the roads there were bad to begin with, and there was lots of accidents in that territory for people falling asleep at the wheel or crashing and so forth, because the rides were really long some of the time, and there's deer on the roads and black ice and all kinds of crazy shit. And at one point, Bruce was driving and Dynamite was in the back, and he put like a pop or something in the cup holder, and he said, "Bruce, drink it. My gift to you," or something along those lines. And Bruce said he knew better than to accept a drink from Dynamite, and he felt that Dynamite was being so pushy about it that he better not take a drink out of this. So in the end, he convinced whoever was in the passenger seat to take a drink out of it. And like 5 minutes later, the guy was in a coma. And Bruce is like, "What the fuck did you put in there? Do you realize I'm driving? And if that had happened to me, we all would be dead right now." And they just laughed. So that's funny. That shows you something about their personality. Smokey used to watch Stampede Wrestling on Channel 3 with rabbit ears and tinfoil antenna. Loved when Dynamite Kid came to Oregon. Of course, he wrestled in Oregon a lot. Buddy Rose brought him in, and he heel turned. I never actually have seen Dynamite in the Oregon territory, but I know he was over there. We have a Dynamite fan checking in. Someone says wrestlers were assholes back then. They're still assholes today. You can't trust. Steve Austin is right. You really can't trust people in the wrestling business. There's some that I would consider friends, but few. And even then, I might be wrong about them. And I'm going to end it at that because people are asking other questions. Jonathan brings up that Adrian Adonis died in a car crash as well. So, yeah, lots of wrestlers have died in car crashes. The roads are dangerous enough without the driver's drinks getting H-bombed. So I'm glad that the whole H-bombing thing and the drugging people is kind of out of wrestling. Victor Murphy. Yeah, I wouldn't say cocaine use is fully out of wrestling, but it's not what it was in the 80s. Lucas Benoit was obsessed with Dynamite. Yeah. Let's not talk about Benoit anymore. Have a great Sunday.
Thank you for watching the Hannibal TV. Please like this video if you enjoyed it and click the subscribe button.